26th, 2011 Placer County Board of Supervisors meeting, and we'll start with a flag salute led by Supervisor Holmes. And would you read the meeting procedures, please?
Welcome to the Placer County Board of Supervisors meeting of Tuesday, July 26, 2011. Agendas are available on the wall out on the chair on the other side of this meeting room. If you're here to speak on an issue not appearing on the agenda, you may do so during the public comment period. There's a 3-minute time limit per speaker. The board is not permitted to take action on items addressed under public comment. When you speak, clearly state your name and address for the record. All items on the agenda will be open for the public to address before final action is taken. There's a 3-minute time limit per speaker, which will be monitored by a timer on the podium. If there is a person speaking on behalf of a group with no other testimony from another member of the group, please identify yourself as such, and your time may be extended at the pleasure of the board. Keep in mind that the chairman has discretion limiting the total discussion time on any item. If you are hearing impaired, we have listening devices available. It is requested that all pagers and cell phones be either turned off or put in the silent mode. Thank you for your participation and cooperation.
Thanks, Sam. Next is the time for public comment. This is when anyone from the public can address the board on something that is not on the agenda. Please step forward and state your name for the record. Keep in mind that we can take no action on the item that you raise.
Thanks for the time. My name is Carolyn Pretzer. I'm a Tahoe Vista resident. By now you know I'm a bus rider. I'm here to publicly commend your bus drivers. They are doing a fabulous job. Between their schedule with added service on the North Shore, the construction, and drivers, be they tourists, locals, or delivery trucks. They're being friendly, courteous, helpful, the whole bit. It's really improved this summer, and I want to comment on that. You need to know that to the people on the street, the North Tahoe Marina blames the county for the lack of the bus shelter, which I understand the Department of Public Works is working on. But they made the comment to me, well, they're meeting over in Squaw, you don't have your bus shelter yet. But I do want to compliment the drivers, and you need to know what's being said. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else? Please come forward, state your name.
Good morning. My name is Kelly Toomey, and I'm a 20-year resident of Homewood. And I'm speaking this morning on behalf of myself and my family, and I'm not representing any organization. Recently, I've had the opportunity to attend several public meetings that the Tahoe Transportation District has hosted in regards to the State Route Highway 89 Fanny Bridge Community Revitalization Project. And as a resident, I just wanted to publicly express my support to you on this project. I think it's something that it's a very worthwhile project, and I strongly believe it's something that the West Shore and Tahoe City needs for our community. It's going to help reduce traffic congestion, make it easier and more enjoyable to come to Tahoe City to dine and recreate. There's many locals like myself who hesitate or avoid altogether coming into Tahoe City. And if this project were to move forward, I think there's a lot of positive activities that could take place at the Y that would build a stronger sense of community and encourage locals and visitors to come into Tahoe City. I also think it's a great opportunity for local businesses to grow their business and for Tahoe City to become more vibrant like it used to be. So thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else from the public who would like to support on something not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and open up supervisor committee reports. Kirk, do you have anything? Jack?
Yes, I just wanted to report out. I attended the initial inaugural meeting of the Community Corrections Partnership, and that is the group of folks that are going to implement AB 109, which is the Health and Human Services, in addition to our law enforcement realignment. That meeting was attended by the courts, representatives from the courts, the Sheriff's Office, District Attorney's Office, Health and Human Services, and also probation Was very pleased to listen to a lot of the discussion that was going on about the implementation of AB 109. And all of the group were in unison that they need to be very careful in how they create these programs, how they assess and evaluate the offenders that are going to be returning to county jurisdiction. And the overriding concern was the public and making sure that they were protected and by any means necessary with regards to how we evaluate and provide programs for those offenders. You often wonder whether or not your skill set is going to be of any value down the road, and fortunately for me, I have represented with the Department of Justice, the Department of Corrections, the Bureau of Prison Terms, and the Youth Authority. So it's quite surprising that I'm able to at least provide some input from an operations perspective to the group. So I'm looking forward to successful implementation. There's going to be some challenges along the way with regards to budgeting and also implementation of various programs, but my sense of the group is that the overwhelming and overriding concern was public safety. Thank you.
Jim?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. June the 7th, I was honored to go to Washington, D.C. on behalf of the Placer County Air Pollution Control District to receive an Environmental Protection Agency Clean Air Excellence Award, one of only 12 jurisdictions in the nation that receive these awards. Now, it was for our biomass utilization project in the Tahoe Basin. Did not have anything to do with the biomass plant. It's our efforts to work with the U.S. Department of Forestry to remove that slash and the debris that comes out of the forest instead of burning it, chipping it, and hauling it and shipping it. I was accompanied by the Air Pollution Control Officer, Tom Kristoff, Dan Giron, who is the Deputy Regional Forester for the Southwest Region, and George Emerson, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Sierra Pacific Industries. The benefits of that trip were mostly meeting with U.S. Forest Service high-level people and explaining our program. We did have a kind of a joint meeting with Bureau of Reclamation, Bureau of Land Management, and Forest Service people explaining our program, and it was well received. So just wanted to report that. Thank you.
Yeah, I actually have an announcement about an upcoming thing that I just want to start trying to get out into the public consciousness. Rick Buckman, our Veteran Services Director, and I are going to be putting on a Veterans Resource Fair in Colfax on August 27th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And we're really trying to reach out to the veterans from Lake Tahoe to about Auburn, to just let them know what's available. We will have service providers. We'll have someone from the VA there to help with any claims. We will have some program speakers that identify the services that are available to veterans, whether they served in peacetime or during conflict. There will be lunch provided. So that will be, again, at the Colfax Veterans Hall on Saturday, August 27th. I'm going to give this flyer to the clerk of the board and ask her to forward it to my fellow supervisors so that they can help try to get that information out. One of the problems that we have in reaching out to veterans, particularly here, I think, in the foothills area and the mountainous area, is that a lot of the vets who moved up here don't want to be connected. They want to be frankly, not reminded of their service time, and so they're missing a lot of the things to which they are entitled. And so we're really trying to make that outreach. So I'll be contacting as many community veterans groups, public service groups to try to get this information out, because we really do owe it to these folks, and these are things that they deserve. They earned these things. These are not giveaways. They're not gifts. They're things that they really earned through their service. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks. Next is the consent agenda. This is a list of items that are intended to be passed in one motion, but the board's happy to pull any if anyone would like us to do that. And Supervisor Duran requested that we pull item 11 and 12C.
Item 11 and 12C, yes, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else, or is there anyone from the public who'd like us to discuss something individually? Seeing none.
Move approval of the remaining items.
It's Moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as modified. Ann, roll call, please.
Yes.
Duran.
Yes.
Bueller. Montgomery.
Yes.
Weigand.
Yes. Item 11. This is a contract with Houserath Economics Group.
And just so you're aware, my questions are in the form of just housekeeping. I know that the county has had an extended relationship with Houserath for the provision of professional services related to economic analysis. And as I do with my own business, I periodically take a look at the big picture of what services are being provided, how the relationship is going, whether or not there are alternate contractors and vendors out there that can provide equal or superior services, and I'm just looking to kind of have that discussion.
Yes, thank you very much. For those that are listening, the contract that is proposed or requested is $175,000 with Houserath Economics Group, who has provided economic analysis services for the county actually for many years. We did go out on an RFP, and I'm going to say it's been 5 years. And since that time, it's been renewed each year under the specialized service provision of the purchasing agreement or purchasing code. And I will tell you, one of the reasons that we have not gone back and done another RFP at this point is we have some analyses and annexations that have extended over many 4, 5, sometimes 6 years. And the thing that happens is we are able to provide some continuity in those analyses as we go from one analysis to the next. And as you're aware, Supervisor Duran, sometimes those are somewhat iterative as we look at a range of assumptions or look at a range of outcomes that we look at it in different ways. So that's one of the reasons we really have stuck with this particular contractor. As you know, we do vet these assumptions with the cities in the cases of annexations, with the developers in the cases of when there's a new development. And each of those typically have their own economic consultant. So I think from a practical standpoint, the approach is similar, and it really relies on the assumptions that are provided and addressed with the economic consultant. So we haven't gone out, and I'm going to say it's about 5, and I'll check the correct number of years, but those are the reasons we have really focused on this particular consultant and certainly recognize the benefit of doing a broader approach to securing a consultant.
Thank you. Is the $175,000, is that consistent with what the market rate is for a contract of that nature?
Absolutely. In fact, this consultant has consistently come in much lower than other consultants, and part of that is she is not, I'm saying she because we work with one particular individual in that firm, she's not rebuilding each year, and she's not having to recreate a base amount of information.
Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So, pleasure of the board. Moved and seconded to approve the just discussed Houserath contract. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And item 12C, renewal of Fire Recovery USA billing services. Rui.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Rui Cunha, Placer County Office of Emergency Services. The item in front of you asks that you approve the renewal for 1 year of the agreement with Fire Recovery USA, which was formally approved by your board in April 2010. That contract is for cost recovery, cost recoupment to Placer County Fire from at-fault non-resident drivers involved in accidents for which the fire department is called to serve. Additionally, you're asked to approve automatic renewals subject to either party providing written notice that we don't wish to renew any further. And then lastly, you're asked to approve authorization for the Placer County purchasing agent to sign the agreement on behalf of Placer County. As I mentioned, this agreement with Fire Recovery USA was approved in April 2010 for implementation between July 1st, 2010 and June 30th, 2011. So the agreement is currently expired. What we have done in this particular instance is we have backdated the agreement to the 1st of July, and so with your board's approval, the agreement will continue from the 1st of July going forward. We have recovered over the past year about $15,000 as a result of accidents that have occurred in the Dry Creek area, in North Auburn Ophir Fire area, in Western Placer, and in other areas where, again, at-fault, non-resident drivers have caused an incident requiring the fire department to respond to that incident, thus costing each of those individual zones of benefit as a result of that. And naturally, those costs are not paid by those drivers that are causing the accident. They're outside of the area. The residents of Dry Creek are paying. That at-fault driver is not. The residents of North Auburn are paying. The at-fault driver is not. We have an additional $7,000 that are waiting for recoupment, and that's a constant process. The bills go out to the various insurance companies, and then there's a period of time where those bills are adjudicated. All of the funding that comes in from Fire Recovery USA goes to the various zones of benefit from where the accident occurred. It doesn't go generally to the fire general fund. It doesn't go to the county general fund. It goes specifically to the zone of benefit that incurred the cost from the at-fault driver that fundamentally caused the problem. And so that in a nutshell is what we're asking for. We're asking additionally for the automatic renewals, primarily because we're pretty satisfied with the customer service that Fire Recovery USA has given us so far, and we're very satisfied that they have developed a system where they're fully understanding how to determine residents versus non-residents in accidents, how to determine at-fault versus not at fault in any given accident, and we're very satisfied and very confident that they're meeting your board's original guidance as it relates to this policy when it was approved in April 2010. Subject to any questions that you might have, that's all that I have.
Thank you, Brew. And I brought this forward because I think since the time that it was implemented, there's been several jurisdictions that have repealed their so-called crash tax for a variety of reasons. I'm going to start with just my own essence of what I see here. The first thing I have trouble with is the automatic renewal. I really don't like automatic renewals, especially for contracts of this nature, because in my opinion, it's kind of like a ship at sea that never reaches port, and out of sight, out of mind. So that's one of the things that I have. The other thing, and I think it's more of a policy, discussion that my fellow supervisors may want to provide some input on is the message that we're sending. Both Sacramento and Roseville repealed theirs, and part of the analysis was, what are we saying to people that are traveling to our jurisdictions for vacations or to shop or to do other things? That's one thing. The other question that I have, and this is more along the lines of having some education about the insurance system and being a former defense attorney for insurance companies, is the question of liability. And that's a very, very difficult analysis. And I know that that's placed on the back of this company that's supposed to be handling all of that business, but that's a real complicated discussion. The final issue would be how much staff time is spent to recover that $15,000 that we're getting from, out of these incidents?
Let me start from the back and go forward. The amount of staff time is actually minimal. It's the time that it took us to put together a renewal agreement, and quite frankly, Fire Recovery USA assisted us. We reviewed their work, ran it through County Council, Risk Management, and so on. So the amount of county staff time that it takes to review an agreement such as this is very, very small. As far as I do understand the policy issues, I do understand what is it that we're saying. I will say that for cities in particular that ultimately fund their fire service a little different than counties fund their fire service. Fire service in the county doesn't have the benefit of sales tax as part of its revenue stream. Dry Creek, as you know, has two sources of revenue. It's property tax and then the benefit assessment associated with that jurisdiction. They don't benefit from sales tax. And quite frankly, that traveler who's traveling through, who might be spending money in that jurisdiction, isn't funding the fire service in any way. That's quite different in cities. It is very, very easy to argue that, in fact, a traveler into the city of Roseville is double paying if they're paying the motor vehicle accident fee plus paying sales tax as they're traveling in and out of the city of Roseville. And I think that is a solid argument. Most of the special districts in Placer County are continuing these agreements with Fire Recovery USA for exactly that reason. The funding that comes to the fire service in the unincorporated county area, to include all of the special districts, comes from property tax as well as any benefit assessment that they have. They do not realize any benefit from sales tax, and so quite frankly, anyone who drives through those jurisdictions and is at fault in an accident, they're not paying for the costs that they have incurred. So what are we saying to residents? We're saying be careful when you drive in Placer County. I think that's what we're saying. So that would be my position.
This fire crash tax, if you want to call it that, is not unique to Placer County Fire. And in particular, there's 3 fire districts in my district, Newcastle, Penryn, and Loomis, who are strapped for cash, and they're right on the 80 corridor. They're responding to accidents all the time on the 80 corridor. And this is a way for them to recoup some of the costs that they're out there. They got sometimes 4 or 5 people on that call. So, I'm in favor of this. I think it's a good deal to recoup the money for the services that are provided to people that aren't paying the property tax or sales tax.
Questions or comments? Pleasure of the board.
Move approval of the item.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the item just discussed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Thank you.
Motion carries. So now we will move to our our first department item, which is an exciting discussion and action regarding trenchless technology for sewer pipe rehabilitation. Mr. Durfee.
I'll try to make this flow smoothly. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, board members. Jim Durfee with Facility Services. I have a contract recommendation this morning that your board approve plans and specifications and authorize us to put a project out to bid for our trenchless technology sewer rehab project. Also included in our recommendation is that you adopt a resolution authorizing the Director of Facility Services or his designee to execute the resulting contract in an amount not to exceed $322,426 upon Risk Management and County Council's review and approval, and that that authorization also include required change orders consistent with the County Purchasing Manual and the Public Contract Code. This is part of our annual rehabilitation program. We utilize these trenchless technologies. They're a very cost-effective way for us to rehab sewer lines. Essentially, you pull a liner through the line, run a collet through to expand it against the walls of the line of the existing pipeline, and you add probably 25 to 30% additional lifespan to that pipeline for a very cost-effective approach. Avoids us digging up the streets. Usually the work's done at night when there's minimal traffic impact and so forth. So it's a very cost-effective approach to rehabbing the sewer lines. It's only part of our efforts. You'll recall that we do manhole lining, we do point repairs where we do actually dig pipelines up and so forth. But this is an important component of our plan. So we are recommending this morning that you allow us to go out to bid with this. The monies are budgeted in Sewer Maintenance District Number 1 and Sewer Maintenance District 2, and these costs were anticipated in the budget. So with that, I'd answer any questions you may have.
No video?
No video. I can do that for you next time.
Thanks. Questions, comments? Pleasure of the board. Moved and seconded to approve the plans, specifications regarding trenchless technology for sewer rehabilitation and adopt a resolution authorizing the Director of Facility Services to undertake a contract not to exceed $322,000 plus. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Jim. We will now adjourn as the Placer County Board of Supervisors and convene as the Redevelopment Agency to consider a report on the prioritization of the North Lake Tahoe redevelopment project area. Jim.
Good morning. Jim LeBou, Redevelopment Agency. In May, your board approved the next 5-year implementation plan for the North Lake Tahoe redevelopment project area, and you also directed us, staff, to continue work with the local community and focus on some discussions about prioritization within that plan for activities, projects, funding, and so forth. We've been working with numerous individuals and community groups since then, and we've distributed the plan to a number of groups, local groups and individuals, and have solicited comments on priorities to them. We've met with NITRAC 3 times in the last recent months, and they have asked us at the most recent meeting to come back with more information so they can continue that discussion, and we'll see if they come up with a recommendation. We've also are scheduled to meet tonight with the board of the North Tahoe Business Association, and we're scheduled to meet in a few days with the Resort Association as well. So what we're presenting to you today is what we are presenting to the local community right now. Basically, how redevelopment, how we are approaching our implementation of our goals and our implementation plan, our approach, our philosophy. It's grounded largely in history of what the agency has been doing for the last 15 years. We are committed to carrying out decisions that your board has already made. In June, you adopted the proposed budget for fiscal year 11-12, which included $29 million of proposed expenditures on various activities and projects, which we've been many of which we've been working on for years, and we plan to continue to do that. As I think you're aware, we have been focusing and wrestling our redevelopment agency with the impacts coming out of state legislation, their attempts to balance the budget. They're going after redevelopment agencies throughout the state for money. And we are faced with a legislation that says we either have to close our doors and terminate the redevelopment agency or pay $3.8 million approximately in the current fiscal year and approximately $900,000 in future years adjusted for inflation. So we've been really focusing on that challenge and plan to come back to your board at your next meeting, August 9th, with a proposal of how to deal with that situation. We are going to be recommending that the redevelopment agency continue to operate and commit to making that payment. We'll come up with a specific plan of how to do that. It's been a challenging process, and we'll go into it in detail at the next meeting. There is, as I think you're probably also aware, litigation that's been filed against the state legislation. It may turn out that we don't have to make that payment if the litigants prevail in that action against the state legislation. However, regardless of what we think may come out of that litigation, we can't plan for that, that we would come out not having to make that payment. We have to plan for making that payment, and that's exactly what we're doing. So what that means is our current planning involves a lot of belt tightening and constraining our vision for the future of what we may be able to do. This, of course, affects our implementation plan and how we're going to carry that out. Without going into that detail, we do believe that we will be able to continue to implement the large majority of what we've been working on over the last several years and not have to abandon any of our significant projects, particularly in the Tahoe area. We are shorthanded right now in staff due to some recent retirements. We are probably going to have to continue to operate shorthanded and lessen our view of adding on projects and adding on more programs to spend money, but the basic thrust of our program we think will continue. So we are planning to continue to engage local community, these groups, and we welcome other groups to come forward, and if they're interested, we'd be happy to go out and meet with them and talk more about the future of our program in North Tahoe and prioritize any interest that community folks have in particular projects or activities, high priority, low priority, and so forth. Our basic philosophy in redevelopment is consistent with redevelopment law in that, and decisions that your board has already taken to continue to carry out the projects and programs that you have already approved that are in our current budget, and we will plan to implement as much of that as we can, and we think we'll be able to implement most of it, almost all of it. And redevelopment is different than many other departments in the county. We are one arm of the county that does work with all the other departments as well as outside agencies in trying to pursue the goals of the county, but we have our own goals, which are a little bit different. Our goals are largely tied to things like community revitalization, removal of blight, creating opportunities for other agencies and particularly private parties, property owners, businesses to make improvements on their own if they have obstacles to making improvements on their properties and with their businesses. We are there to attempt to create a bridge and remove obstacles to allow them to do that, which are, and those projects we're particularly interested are ones that provide benefit not just to those individual businesses but to the overall community. And sometimes those improvements are infrastructure improvements that the funding is not completely there for from other sources, and we can provide gap financing to make those projects go, which would not otherwise be able to go, at least not as quickly as we'd like them to create that benefit for the community. So we're continuing to work on this, and we'll be able to report more as far as the community gives us more particular feedback on what they're interested in.
Thanks, Jim. Questions or comments? Jennifer?
Yes. I have some comments on this. This did come to the NITRAC board, as indeed Jim said, for the third time. They were very frustrated. What we had asked for was a prioritized list that identified where projects were. We didn't get that. We got what is in our board package, pages 79 through 82. And the NITRAC board, frankly, was very frustrated because we got a laundry list of everything that's out there with no prioritization. What the NITRAC board asked for, and I'm very disappointed not to see it in this package, is a spreadsheet that says, here's the name of the project, here's the total dollars, here's what's contractually obligated, here's what's not contractually obligated. We ran through that. We did a back-of-the-envelope scenario at NITRAC and tried to figure out, with the help of Joanne Auerbach, who gave the presentation and really did quite a good job, we tried to figure out, what is contractually obligated, therefore protected from the state, what is not contractually obligated, what are the total dollars we have to work with, and again, just very back of the envelope, we came up with what appeared to be about $520,000 in funds that were not contractually obligated currently in one form or another. Interestingly, that is the exact amount that's been proposed for the fire station in Tahoe City, and the NITRAC board unanimously recommended that if that dollar amount was available, that it should go to finish the Tahoe City project rather than any of the other projects that were not contractually obligated at this point. This board has also asked to see a prioritized listing, and while there has been some attempt at this in here, I still think there's room for improvement to make it much clearer to us and to the community as to what are the projects, what are the total dollars we're talking about, what of those total dollars are currently contractually obligated, what are proposed, if we have those dollars for the future. It's very hard for me to look at this long list of projects, all of which have real benefits that could accrue from them, but really understand which ones are we obligated to move forward on, and which ones are we not. So if we do get to the point where we don't have the dollars to move forward on all of this, which is what it sounds like you're telling us, we can figure out what are our priorities, what is the community's priorities in this. So those are my comments. I'm a little frustrated. I will have no problem accepting this report, but I really hope that we can see that spreadsheet, we can see that metric, because frankly, it's just a very difficult process for us as a board and for the community to understand where are we in these projects, where are we over the next 5 years. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay.
Yeah, actually, I think the supervisor raises an interesting question, and this is just maybe a procedural. Are redevelopment agencies audited for these types of things? With regards to their plans and their detail and all of that?
We are audited every year for our expenditures, and I don't think there's an audit as far as you do a correct implementation plan or not one, but I mean, other than procedurally, you have to have one, and we are required that our activities and our expenditures are consistent with our implementation plan.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think with this additional comment, we're prepared to come back with a little bit different list. I think that the understanding was that there would be identification of priorities by redevelopment staff, and they did. If there's a desire to have really a list of per project money spent, contractually obligated, that can be accomplished and brought back for the board as well. Speaking to a couple other items that were raised, there is a couple of contracts that are under preparation, one in particular for the fire district that deals with that contribution that we cannot execute till the board makes a decision to keep redevelopment around. So we're restricted from entering into any contracts, and that's one it's really pending and all but consummated, and we're waiting to bring back once the board has been able to make that determination sometime in August, when an ordinance will be brought forward for you to make that decision. So I think that redevelopment agency staff can come back with a more definitive list that identifies by project the amount of monies that's been expended or committed per day to each one of those projects. The more iffy part of that, because you're talking about a future revenue stream, and you're talking about negotiating sometimes a contribution. For example, Domus, a successfully completed project at this time, 4 years ago, you cannot fill in any of those, how much more dollars will it take. That had to be a negotiated process to contribute, had to deal with other grants that came from other agencies to end up doing that project. So the real iffy part of that column is going to be how many more dollars are going to go to any one of the projects that are not directly infrastructure type dollars like the fire district contribution. When you're looking at truly economic development or redevelopment, you have to have flexibility in what kind of allocation is going to be provided there in the future. So I just want to let your board know we can come back with more definitive information, but there's always going to be the missing link about how much more money for a particular project, especially into the future, because there are a lot more variables, a lot more negotiation that goes on. And quite frankly, you don't want to identify for some of these projects what that dollar amount is. You want to leave it subject to negotiation, or else you're already showing where you're committing those dollars.
Tony?
Just one more question. I would comment. I think that's fair. I think the more information that we can provide, especially in a time when redevelopment agencies are under attack for a variety of reasons, to bolster what we're doing is a good thing.
Tony, did you want to add?
You know, I just would like to echo some of the comments that Jim made earlier. I mean, the redevelopment's been in the mix for the state legislature for the last 2 years, particularly the last 12 months. At the very end, literally toward May, they come up with a brand new plan that says, okay, you don't have to pay attention to anything you've studied and prepared for, because what we were offering was going to go off the board. Now we're just going to take a percentage of your money, if you have the money to pay, and allow you to continue your business as normal. And this whole discussion of how committed you were and where your money was, I think it shifted dramatically. At the same time, there's statewide concern about the legislation. There's a lot of analysis going into whether that's legal or not. There's litigation that's pending. And I don't want to say the world's topsy-turvy for redevelopment, but everybody is rushing to try to figure out, how do I stay in business, just to stay in business, and what do I have to accomplish? And you know, and I'm just trying to be supportive of the agency, is that this has not been an easy 60 days to figure out what their priorities are. I think their priority was to stay in business and not go out of business. And we'll come back and talk about that in August. And I appreciate that the comments, that there are a lot more details, but I really don't think these are anything close to normal times for staff in the RDA. I think that these are extraordinarily difficult and confusing times where you give me 15 lawyers, I'll bet you get 14 different opinions of what's happening in RDA law right now. And I'm not trying to make excuses, because I know we're part of the mix trying to help them, but it's rather confusing right now.
I agree, these are extraordinarily difficult times for the RDA, but you know, from the perspective of just trying to help the community to give input into the process, but which is what the RDA is asking for, that community input and the input from us, we need to be able to present the information in such a way that people can see, you know, in a fairly simple listing, what are the projects. We know what is currently contractually obligated. That you know, I mean, that's just what's happening right now. The future, very hard to predict. I understand that, and if I could predict the future, I'd probably be a really rich woman. But you know, it's not my intent to say that the redevelopment agency, you know, has mishandled this or done a bad job. I realize that it's been a very difficult time for them. I just think we are able to give more clarity both to this board and the community as to where we are in the process with this laundry list of projects we have in front of us.
Okay, is it desire of the board to formally accept the report, or just defer till August? Or?
Did we want public comment?
Is there anyone from the public who would like to address us? Thanks, Jim. Yeah, please come forward and state your name.
Good morning. Ellie Waller, Tahoe Vista resident. I attended the NITRAC meeting in July, and we did have a robust discussion on this prioritization, and I'd like to thank Supervisor Montgomery and Joanne Arbach, who did an excellent job of explaining the difference between an enforceable obligation and an uncommitted item. That being said, when reviewing the list of 19 items before you today, county staff should have provided that information. You could have put a simple yes or no next to those items. One of those items is on your highest priority, as noted in the report. That's the Everett mixed-use parking lot, items 8 and 14, which are not committed except for design. And committing those dollars to design, if you're not going to be doing this in the next 5 years, I think shouldn't be done. I strongly disagree with the county funding the BBLLC Kings Beach Town Center environmental documentation. That's item number 10. You do have promissory notes, I understand that, and it's a risk that the county is going forward to help Kings Beach with their development, but most developers pay for their own environmental documentation. I'd like explicit details on the $11 million obligated to the Kings Beach Corps. That's item number 11. I was disappointed at the NITRAC that it kind of got glossed over at a recommendation of another member of the public. I'd like to know how much is spent to date and what the timeline of those remaining dollars is. I think less priority should be given to the Tahoe Vista Recreation Area. It's dependent on the boat launch being open. The North Lake Tahoe commercial item, number 5, there's currently no facade loans, and I agree that they're great loans to assist the small businesses, but I do take issue with a pending one that I've mentioned before. Mitigations and BMP should be complete before facade loans are let. Raise the priority of the Tahoe City Fire Station. Thank you, Tom, for the discussion on that. For your information, the items that aren't committed are 4, 5A, 6 and 7 for remediation only, 8 is design only, 9, 12, a small portion of 13, and 15 with contingencies. As Supervisor Montgomery mentioned, that's about your $2 million. I would suggest when you meet with the NTBA and the Resort Association, Jim, that you explain the difference between the enforceable and uncommitted. And I am disappointed that the infrastructure requests that I put in generally for sidewalks, waiting for a developer to put a sidewalk in, especially National Avenue where the trailer park is and the TART system is used quite often, would have been a top priority by the needs of the Tahoe Vista community, and also looking at the Snow Creek EIP that was mentioned yesterday. Thank you for your opportunity today.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ann Nichols, North Tahoe Preservation Alliance, 40-year resident, realtor. I just wanted to say that maybe it's time to take a breath about redevelopment and reassess the needs of a lot of these projects. Are we just a train going down a track wildly, supporting projects that in the giddy pre-recession times seemed like a great idea? But now, do we need 66,000 square feet of commercial floor area in Kings Beach and 20,000 square feet of government offices with the BBLLC? Plus, we've got 20,000 more at State Line, and Ferrari is proposing another development. Shouldn't we take this time and just, instead of approve, let's look at this stuff, see if there's a business financial realism for it. It could be part of the analysis. A good redevelopment agency, I'm sure, always does that. So I'm just wondering if we could just take that time and think about this, particularly the Everett project. I mean, you guys have bought the property. I know you want to do something with it, but do we really need it when we have all these other things in the pipeline? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public like to comment on this? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for action, if any. We don't have to take any.
Move approval that we accept the report on prioritization for the North Lake Tahoe redevelopment project area 5-year implementation plan.
Moved and seconded to accept the prioritization report, North Lake Tahoe redevelopment project area. All those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carries. We will adjourn as the Placer County Redevelopment Agency and reconvene as the Board of Supervisors and take up our 9:45 timed item, which is Community Development Resources, an update on the Tahoe Basin Community Plan. Crystal and Paul. Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Paul Thompson here with Planning Services Division. This first item before you is staff is requesting that your board consider an overall work program for the Tahoe Community Plan update, as well as direct staff to commence with the Community Plan update process and associated outreach program. So with that, I'm going to introduce Crystal Jacobson. She's going to be presenting the report today.
morning. Is that on? Good morning. I'm Crystal Jacobson with the Placer County Planning Services Division, and as Paul noted, the item before you today is a report on our development of the Tahoe Basin Community Plan Update Work Program. So just to provide you some background, as directed by your board with adoption of the planning fiscal year 2010-2011 budget, staff initiated the process of updating the county's community and general plans within the Tahoe Basin. We currently maintain 9 plans within the basin. Most are joint planning documents adopted by the county and the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency nearly 20 years ago. TRPA is currently in the process of updating their regional plan, and community plans within the Tahoe Basin must be consistent with that plan. Because of that, and given the age of the county's community and general plans in the basin, it is timely for the county to consider the update of the community and general plans. With that, staff began drafting the work program for this program in November. And planning staff has been working with the county's redevelopment agency, given the redevelopment areas in the basin, and we've also begun coordination with TRPA. The proposed community plan update process is building off of TRPA's Pathway 2007 Basin-wide Management Plan. So this is really a list of the overall tasks associated with this work program. The first is really the coordination, sort of defining regulatory agency roles, and then the coordination with those agencies. This task has been underway. As I noted, we have been meeting with TRPA, and that would be county staff and redevelopment staff. It is TRPA's desire. They've indicated that the regional plan update and the community plan updates develop in concert with one another. TRPA has outlined a 2-year schedule for completing its RPU. So it is the intent of the county to maintain a very similar time frame so that those two do run side by side. I would also like to point out that in an effort to exchange and share information, TRPA and resources actually, TRPA has indicated that the county would have access to their environmental and design consultants. And we have actually met with their consultants to address how the county's community plan update process and the RPU can work together and how we're going to utilize those resources. The next step is a reclassification of zoning, or what's called trans-sect zoning districts. As part of the regional plan update, TRPA is they're proposing a modifying zoning system, which, while recognizing existing land uses, results in a reclassification of zoning districts within the entire basin. As a result, in order to maintain consistency with that plan, the county is proposing to utilize that same system. Trans-sect zoning is a type of system. It's a form-based code system. It's designed to enhance the current zoning that we have with more design-oriented standards and graphics to achieve a specific sort of built form. There's an example of this type of code, what it looks like in your staff report package, attachment C. I will also note again that TRPA hired a design consultant to develop this code, and that the county does have access to those consultants. They will be helping local jurisdictions throughout the basin to develop that new system, and then also helping the counties or local jurisdictions to, with a methodology and protocol to engaging the public to develop those systems. The next task is really identification or mapping of what we're calling the plan areas. There are 4 proposed plan areas in the basin that the county is proposing for their community plan update process. I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail on this task here in just a second, so I'm going to move on to the next. The next step would be information gathering. This is really a collection of background materials for the plan. And then also it includes the development of a technical advisory committee, which would help facilitate that process. And then the next step would be public outreach. This is a fairly substantial step, so I'm going to go into further detail on that one as well as the mapping here in just a minute. But we have developed a public outreach strategy, which I'll talk about here in just a second. And then finally, the last 2 steps would be drafting the community plan and related planning documents, and then the environmental scoping and analysis of this program. Real quick on the documents, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here. We have 9 plans now, and we're proposing to consolidate those plans so that we would have one community plan policy document for the county's portion of the basin. So one policy, sort of an overarching policy document, and then 4 separate zoning ordinances and design guidelines for the 4 separate planning areas. And I'll get to that mapping of those areas so you have a better idea of what it is that we're proposing. So just to go into some further detail on the mapping of these areas, again, the county maintains 9 community plans right now, and this is a list here that you see of the areas. So there's a lot of different plans right now in the Tahoe Basin that the county maintains. Here's a map of those. So again, what we're proposing is to consolidate those into one plan. And then the update would include 4 planning areas that we've mapped, for which 4 separate zoning ordinances and design guidelines would be developed. The purpose of this is, of consolidating these, is to provide for a more sort of cohesive, user-friendly planning documents. We have coordinated with TRPA on this effort, the proposed reformatting of this, and the overall mapping, and in general, they've concurred with this approach. Then I'll get here. The plan areas that we're proposing, the 4 plan areas, would be a part of the community plan document. So this is what, these are the areas that have been identified. Number 1 is the West Shore plan area. This includes Homewood, Sunnyside, and Tahoma. The second one is the Tahoe City plan area, which would include Tahoe City, Lake Forest, Dollar Hill, and Tahoe City Gateway. The third is what we're calling right now the North Tahoe West plan area, which includes Carnelian Bay and Tahoe Vista. And then finally, the North Tahoe East plan area, which would include Kings Beach and State Line. This is a map of those areas. And really, we arrived at this delineation because of the sort of natural geographic conditions that exist and the distinctive communities that are present within the county's portion of the basin. To help further define them, we reviewed all kinds of information. We reviewed census tracts, watersheds, PUD boundaries, postal service areas, road and highway networks, existing redevelopment boundaries, and then existing land uses in the basin and proposed transect zone districts. Here's, I have all these other maps that we can refer to if we need to, but these show the various different plan areas that we've mapped. So with that, brings me to the other task, which I want to kind of go into further detail on, which is a public outreach. We have developed a public outreach strategy for the Tahoe Community Plan Update process. This strategy is similar in scope and style to the Granite Bay Community Update Work Program. It's premised on these key points here: the formation of a technical advisory committee, formation of a community plan policy group, formation of 4 geographical plan area teams for each of those plan areas that we have mapped. And then it would include community workshops, which would be held every 2 months for each of those 4 geographical teams. So what we would do is hold community workshops that would be open to the public, and then we would break out into planning sessions with those plan area teams to help develop the zoning ordinances and the design guidelines. It would also include town hall meetings, distribution of electronic newsletters, and a website that will be created for the project, and then regular updates to the North Tahoe Regional Advisory Council, the TRPA Board, Placer County Planning Commission, and your board. So the Technical Advisory Committee would consist of representatives from key county departments and governmental agencies. They would be responsible for reviewing and providing feedback on the planning documents. The Community Plan Policy Group would consist of TAC members and regulatory stakeholders, and participation would be limited to reviewing and providing feedback on the policy document itself, which would be prepared by staff. The 4 geographical plan area teams would consist of a balanced combination of business, homeowner associations, environmental groups, and residential representatives. Each plan area team, we anticipate including about 7 to 9 members. The team members would be required to live in or have an active business in the plan area for which they're representing. And they must be registered to vote in or have a primary residence in that plan area. The team members we're proposing to be selected by their representative organizations. So the business community would represent or select a representative from their community, same with environmental communities and so on. So this brings us to the fiscal impact to the county. The fiscal impact that has been identified is based on this proposed public outreach strategy, which is an aggressive strategy for this project. We anticipate that the community participation would be moderate. There would be, that the public would be involved in drafting and developing zoning ordinances and design guidelines that are really reflective of the overall vision of their community. The staffing commitment, as you'll see in the budget, is in terms of the hours is moderate. We are proposing to use existing staff from key departments. The estimated total impact to the county is approximately $2.6 million. That's based on a 3-year work program, and it would be for the development of 5 planning documents. This would include $2.2 million in labor and overhead, again, using all the key departments would be using existing staff, and approximately $375,000 in funds from the Redevelopment Agency and the Tahoe County Executive Office for the preparation of the environmental work. The estimated total cost is approximately $3.1 million, which again is based upon a 3-year work program, pretty aggressive schedule. This includes costs of the approximated cost of $2.6 million to the county, and then approximately $475,000 in costs associated with some grant funding that the county's received for background materials for the environmental work, in addition to an estimated cost for the shared resources of the work that we'll be getting from TRPA with our environmental and design consultants. That brings me to the next steps. We will be starting the step of information gathering and background data, which would be developing the TAC, the Technical Advisory Committee, and then conducting those meetings to gather that information. We would also engage in further coordination with TRPA and help to refine those proposed transect zoning districts. I will note that the item after mine goes into further detail about those transects. And I would also like to note that TRPA has really been working with our staff on helping to not only define those districts, but to define the development standards within those districts. So we have been meeting for the past 6 months on that, and it's really a coordinated, collaborative effort in that regard. The next step would be launching the public outreach strategy, and then of course the development of the planning documents. I would like to note that we did provide a presentation to NITRAC regarding this work program at its May meeting in Kings Beach, and we anticipate to provide another update to them at its August meeting in Tahoe City, and which would be followed then by a town hall meeting to kind of kick off the project. And then after that, we would anticipate the community workshops and the TAC meetings to commence in September. So in summary, to wrap up, this report is intended to generate discussion and feedback from your board, and staff is seeking your board's concurrence that staff is implementing your direction on the overall work program for this update process. With that, staff recommends your board direct staff to proceed with the proposed work program budget contained in attachment B of the staff report, which is reflective of the public outreach strategy described today. And I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thanks. Questions or comments at this point? Jennifer.
Yeah. Crystal, could you go back to slide number 16, please? I wanted to just emphasize that last bullet point there, which is that team members will be selected by their respective organizations. This is something that Crystal and I and Ray James have had some pretty good conversations about, and we really came to the conclusion that for the team members to be representative of their communities, they need to be selected by their communities. And so these are not people who are going to be, picked by the county. It's not random names that are going to be drawn out of a hat, which was one of my initial proposals. But it's the team members, the conservation community for a specific plan area is going to say, this is who we want to represent us in these discussions. Same with the business community. And so I just think it's really important for folks to understand that the community is going to be the people who are identifying their representatives. And I just think that's a great way of doing it. It was, I think, Crystal's suggestion originally, and I just wanted to shout out to her because I think it's a great suggestion, frankly. Could you go to slide 17, please? Mm-hmm. On the fiscal impact question, $2.6 million sounds like and is a lot of money. It is spread over a 3-year work program. can you give us, and I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot here, can you give us just sort of a comparison as to what other community plan updates cost the county? Like I know, for example, we discussed the Granite Bay community plan update, and we settled on just a policy update for that one community plan.
Correct, yeah. As noted in the staff report package, the Granite Bay plan is used as a comparison because we're looking at their public outreach strategy and trying to take a similar approach. And to date, the cost for that has been calculated at about $250,000, and that's for CEDRA staff time. So it's again existing staff, and that's includes labor and overhead. That project is underway, as you know, so it has not been finalized. It's anticipated that cost will go up, probably by another $100,000 to $150,000 again for CEDRA costs. But I think the most important thing to note here is that the Granite Bay Community Plan, while we're following the similar public outreach strategy, it is just a policy update, whereas this work program that we're talking about here today includes a policy update of 9 plans, which we're consolidating into one policy document. But in addition to that, the development and preparation of 4 different zoning ordinances and design guidelines. So it's a lot more intensive of a work program. So hence, you know, the higher fiscal impact to the county.
Thank you.
Questions or comments?
If you'd allow me, just to make one comment. Talking with Michael Johnson, just so your board's aware, the CEDRA and Planning Department has a pretty heavy workload in terms of the comprehensive plan for the West in terms of the conservation plan, and then also finishing up the Granite Bay Community Plan, and also embarking upon this. It'll pretty much consume all their available resources for advanced planning efforts, and you'll probably have more of that brought to your attention during the budget workshops that are coming up. But it is still done in the context of completing the conservation plan.
Any other questions or comments? Anyone from the public wish to address this item?
Yeah, I'm going to move to the map too.
Nice presentation, Crystal, but Paul, you got to quit hogging these presentations.
Ignore.
It's a joke, Paul.
Good morning, Ellie Waller, Tahoe Vista resident. I'm an active public participant and have been promised transparent communication and public outreach on issues that affect my community. I've asked on several occasions over many years to be educated on transect zoning by the county or the TRPA. There was one NITRAC meeting last year with one-way communication, a single presentation by TRPA with really a no question and answer period. I'm having difficulty commenting on a subject that I don't fully understand. I haven't had an opportunity to look at the revised transects or even the maps associated with each of the communities. I have many unanswered questions on what it is and how it will be implemented. I know I can send in written comments, but it's better in an open forum or in a workshop format. Throughout the document, staff states that they've consulted the TRPA. Nowhere has the public been consulted. I can accept consolidation of community plans and plan area statements, but I do not agree that North State Line Brockway Vista should be aligned with Kings Beach, and maybe another area could be put together. They don't marry well. I disagree that Tahoe Vista or Carnelian Bay should be a town center designation. Neighborhood general is still more appropriate. I do not agree that residential density should be 15 or 20 units per acre. I do not agree with 100% coverage incentives within urban and developed areas. I don't want to look like South Shore. Penalties should be assessed to those properties that have not completed their BMPs. Instead, you are requesting incentives. I do agree mobile homes should be reclassified as non-conforming, but I do take issue with a 12-acre lot that you've identified that is currently zoned residential single family that's never been built upon. With this kind of magnitude, this should be brought before the public before you even ask or put it in a document. What is Placer County basing their noise level request to 70 CENL from 55 in a residential neighborhood? And my personal perspective of the residents' vision at Lake Tahoe is there's a significant difference of opinion between the elements of the business community, the governmental agencies and developers, and the residential population. that relates to the urbanization and citification of North Lake Tahoe versus maintenance and preservation of the quality of life that I have. If the movers and shakers continue to fulfill these provisions, I think we're destroying our rural communities. And I will close by asking, do any of you fully understand transect zoning? I'm respectfully asking that you don't vote today and insist Placer County and TRPA have community workshops on transect as part of their due diligence for public outreach. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
Can I ask?
Certainly. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Possibly address a couple of those pieces in there?
Yeah, just in response to the comment, that's exactly what we're proposing to do is through this process, the community plan update, to identify the specific development standards in the individual community plan areas. So no, they haven't been established yet, but that's what we're planning to do is meet with the community and go through the process, make sure that your board's updated on transect zoning and these efforts, as well as work with our partners, TRPA. And I might mention that they're in the audience right now, Harmon Zuckerman and John Hitchcock. So that's the exact proposal.
I have an additional question I'd like to ask. How are the fees calculated with regards to the number of hours spent by CEDRA admin, CEO, county council, facility services? How are they calculated?
Am I on? It's a labor and overhead fee. And what we did is we took, it was an average fee. They ranged from anywhere from $100 an hour to $145, I think was the top. So we took an average of that. It might have been a little bit higher. I don't have the range with me, but it was $135 per hour for that.
Because I'm looking at my calculations on every one of these, and I've just sampled 4 of them, are $145 an hour for CEDRA planning, admin, ESD, and CEO's office.
Right. So, and again, these are estimates in terms of the number of hours that are calculated.
Okay, so are you saying that overall, at the end of the day, this is just your estimate of what the expenses are going to cost?
It was an estimate and an average, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments? Please come forward, state your name.
Ann Nichols, North Tahoe Preservation Alliance. I would have brought my down parka if I'd known it would be so cold in here. My legs are totally purple. Sorry. Anyway, about the community plans, I think that this is a great idea, the community outreach, but I'd like to see an equal representation of government agencies and business and residential and conservation, because I think residential and conservation have similar goals. Business and agencies have also similar goals for development, so it might be kind of balanced nicely. The problem I have with the designation of the community plans is, as someone who's lived in the North State Line area for 40 years, geographically it's much different than Kings Beach. Kings Beach is level, it is bikeable, walkable. You go right to the park, everything's right there, the grocery stores, the schools, all of that. It does make sense. North State Line, the only reason it's there, it's the first place you came to when you hit Nevada to gamble. That's the only reason it's there. It has no other reason. It's not easy to get to. I can't ride my bike up that hill. I really would never, unless I had to, walk up there. So it really should be a sub-area of that plan, of the Eastern Community Plan. It has its own issues. Even TRPA right now in their transsexual zoning, we call it, has it as a 6-story designation, which is only the South State Line Community Plan. Casino Core has 6 stories. So it's really being treated differently. The Boulder Bay development, as you know, it's going 75 feet. We are our own, it's not a one-size-fits-all. We really have our own issues. We don't want to have 6 stories on the California side of the North State Line Community Plan. We want to be individually contacted about this. We don't want to be thrown in with Kings Beach. We have our own concerns. We're afraid that we're going to have a continuation of the existing, what we feel is a high-rise development. So I'm hoping, and also with the transect zoning, they talk about stories. They don't talk about height. Right now it's height, 38 feet, 48 feet, is what the current code is. With stories, there's no limit on height. For instance, in the BBLLC in Kings Beach, the government building is only 2 stories, but it's 56 feet high. So you see, if it's 6 stories, they could go, 100 feet high. So we really need to tie it down, not just stories. We need to go to height. So other than that, I just wanted to say that we want a commitment to describe development with regard to height, not just stories. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Seeing none. Do you need anything more formal from us, Paul, or are there any further comments by board members?
Just to provide us direction to keep moving forward, that you're in agreement with our work program and where we're heading.
I would move that we direct staff to commence with the community plan update process and the associated public outreach program.
All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. And just for the benefit of the community, I think, like to indicate, having been around for a while on the board now, and before that, the Planning Commission, we have a strong commitment here in Placer County to receiving public input, and I'm confident we will accommodate the community's needs with as many hearings that are possible, even at the board. I can't speak for my colleagues, of course, but that's long been a standing culture of ours, and I think it serves us well, and I'm sure we'll continue that commitment. So with that, we'll take up the 10 o'clock timed item, which is also CDRA, discussion on the proposed transit, crosswalk zoning, TRPA plan update.
This next item is before your board is a request to direct staff to submit comments to the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency on the new classifications methodology, which is known as the transect zoning. It also includes some associated maps with that. I would like to mention that this is an ongoing effort. TRPA's request was to have us comment on a range of the development standards, and like we've heard in the previous testimony, we're working with TRPA. I imagine through the community plan update process, those standards will get refined even greater. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve, and he's going to provide some comments on what we'd like to submit to TRPA. We continue to coordinate with the TRPA staff in this effort and are moving forward.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Steve Yolna with the Community Development Resource Agency. As Paul was alluding to, TRPA and Placer County continue to work together on TRPA's work efforts. Oftentimes they will seek our input or comment on some of their new proposals. As your board is aware, the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency is moving forward with the update of their regional plan. Included in this is the revision of the existing environmental threshold carrying capacities, or often referred to simply as thresholds. Just by way of a little bit of history, in January of this year at TRPA's governing board meeting, the TRPA governing board did direct their staff to prepare a reduced scope regional plan update. The intent behind this was to narrow the focus of the regional plan update so as to be able to adhere to timelines and budgetary concerns. The intent behind this was to address the more immediate emergent issues facing both TRPA and the Tahoe Basin community. The areas that were decided to be focused upon were water quality, land use, transportation, catastrophic threats, air quality, and sustainability. As Crystal was indicating earlier, there's an effort right now from TRPA staff to kind of front-load the regional plan update process by addressing the community plans at the same time. The ultimate goal is that they will reach a resolution on this approximately December 2012, and for adoption of both the regional plan update as well as the Tahoe community plans. One of the components that's included within the land use component or portion of the regional plan update is an envisioned shift away from the current land use system that's governs the Tahoe Basin of plan area statements, shifting to a transect crosswalk zoning system. In a nutshell, what this transect zoning system is a series of land use designations from the outlining areas of more rural, often known as T1, to the town center area, more urbanized, classified as T5. The design behind a transect zoning would be tailored to the vision and identity and the needs of the individual communities. At the same time, it would provide certainty and predictability for project proponents to assure that the residents of the projects will conform to the community's vision. At the same time, this will also promote a mixed-use, sustainable, pedestrian, and transit-oriented development patterns so as to reduce the reliance on the private automobile. Some of the goals of the transect zoning system are to assist in the attainment of TRPA's environmental thresholds, as well as adherence to the goals of the Tahoe Regional Planning Compact. Essentially, what transect zoning is intended to do is transfer some of the development within the existing built environment from the environmentally sensitive lands, refocusing them towards the urban center. The remaining goal is to also benefit the economy and preserve and enhance the character of the distinct neighborhoods. As part of the collaborative effort between TRPA and the county, TRPA has asked that the county provide comments on the proposed transect zoning and associated maps. County staff from the Redevelopment Agency, Department of Public Works, Facility Services, Planning Services Division, and executive staff have compiled a list of comments which are included in attachment 2 of your board report. In general, the comments are very supportive of this new zoning system proposal by TRPA. We did identify a few areas of concern or where we had questions about their current proposal. Staff did express concern with TRPA's proposal in that the transect zoning does include very specific development standards within the regional plan. The transect crosswalk zoning system includes very specific setback height and noise development standards, which county staff was of the opinion that these finer points would be better suited as part of the community plan update process as opposed to being included in the regional plan. Reason being is if there's a specific development that does not quite adhere to that, particularly with the existing development that's already in place, that the further refinement of that would be better left to the local jurisdictions. Similar to previous comments the county staff has provided to TRPA, county staff expressed concern with the lack of an acknowledgement of the existing built environment. While county staff completely agrees that new development should completely comply with the new zoning requirements, it's important to acknowledge that much of this area is already developed and that certain allowances may need to be provided or further refinements to some of the zone boundaries and so on and so forth. Additionally, county staff continues to ask that certain incentives be provided to facilitate redevelopment. A perfect example of this would be workforce housing, where perhaps additional allowances for increased density would make some of these projects more economically viable. The remaining comments provided by county staff are more minor in nature and simply requested modifications to make the document a little bit more understandable for both the local jurisdictions, professionals, and the homeowners in the basin. So, with all that, staff is seeking your board's direction to submit the comments reflecting the county's position on the proposed transect zoning, including the zone boundaries and the language associated with the proposed matrix for land uses that's included within the transect crosswalk zoning land use maps as included in attachment 2 of this report. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. As Paul indicated earlier, Harmon Zuckerman, the director of the regional plan, is in the audience, and he would like to address your board John Hitchcock, the Land Use and Design Planning Manager for the Regional Plan Update of TRPA, is also in the audience should you have any questions. So,
Questions, comments by board members at this time? Jennifer?
There's a couple of things in here in the comments from Planning Services Division that I just wanted to note for the public. The county actually is asking essentially in here for the same thing you are, where we're saying we need feet, not stories, because the TRPA doesn't define stories. So that's already on our radar. What I'd like to do is, this is a fairly long list of comments from our Planning Services Division, but at some point what I would really like to do is sit down with John and probably Harmon and go through these issues one-on-one and just have a conversation about these comments and where the TRPA is as relates to our input on this. Since I'm no longer on the TRPA governing board, I'd like to get caught up on what's in this document from the county and where TRPA is in that position. I also just wanted to say that I do share Ellie's frustration a little bit about just understanding the transect zoning and having a fairly simple analysis of what it is and what it isn't. There are a couple of really good resources online that explain it fairly clearly. Probably the easiest way that I can explain it to people is that it's based on biology. It's based on how plants actually go from low scale to very tall in forests, essentially, and that was kind of adopted as a planning model for communities. So at the edges of the community, it starts quite low. The highest point, you know, if you're following a transect model, is normally at the center of the community. Very simplistic way of describing it, but it does help if you visualize it that way. And just as this relates to the last item that we discussed, which is the community plan updates, that's going to be part of the discussion that the four community plan teams talk about. You know, what do we want our community to look like? How low do we want it to start at the edges, and how high do we want it to end up in the center? So again, that'll be part of the discussion moving forward on this. Those are my only comments on this for now.
Kirk?
Just one thing, and perhaps just for the sake of clarification within the record, a couple of times in the staff report we refer to staff comments as attachment 2, yet in our board packet they're labeled attachment B. So I think just for the sake of the record, when we were talking about attachment 2 in the staff report, we are referencing attachment B in the board packet, the comments.
Any other questions or comments? Anyone from the public wish to address us?
Ellie Waller, Tahoe Vista resident. I just want to thank county staff, Steve and Paul, and everybody that's worked on the number of questions that are in the packet. I don't necessarily agree with all of them, but I like the detail, and I'm sure we'll get into the nitty-gritty and not just the height of buildings. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good morning, Board. This is the first time I've had an opportunity to address you. I'm Harmon Zuckerman from TRPA. I'm the Director of the Regional Plan Update. And really, I just wanted to come here to thank you and to let you know that we really support and congratulate you on your planning efforts. I know that you've gone through a lot. You've proposed some redevelopment areas and done a lot of work in terms of community planning already. I want to thank Crystal for explaining the project we're engaged in with the updating of the community plans, and Steve for what he just did, and also just to say that we've been meeting with Placer County staff early and often, from Ray James to Jennifer Merchant to Steve and Paul and everybody, Peter Kratz, who I just saw walk in, and you really have been our most proactive partner. And so we're really here again just to recognize the work that you've done in land use planning, establishing the vision for the future of the county. But I also want to inform you and reassure you that what we're proposing with the regional plan update is to incorporate the vision that your county has in what will become our shared plan. It's not a top-down planning process like you may have come to expect from TRPA. I think it's It's a very different paradigm. It's a different model. But it's a model that's consistent with the agency's new direction. We're focused on partnership, collaboration, and where appropriate, we're really focusing in the regional plan update on delegating authority to local jurisdictions. We've already talked about delegating the authority to permit residential projects to all the local jurisdictions. You know, we've looked at our data. There are only a few thousand developable parcels left in the basin, and really the residential focus is secondary to the focus of implementing the water quality improvements that are required of every jurisdiction through the new Lake Tahoe TMDL. That's, as Steve said, really the focus of the regional plan update. So, you know, I hear people wondering about the specifics, and there's still a lot of specifics that are in your board packet that you saw today. I want to also reassure you that none of this is a done deal. Our board still needs to approve everything that's being produced, and there's still a lot of public outreach to do. What you're really seeing is just an effort to set the groundwork for the public outreach project that we're about to engage in. We wanted to bring our consultant and their design skills to bear on the issue and work with the local jurisdiction partners to get that conversation started. And as soon as we've got, you know, a basis to have a robust conversation with the public, that's the exactly next step, just like Jennifer Montgomery mentioned. So this is really our collective opportunity to partner on creating a vision for the Tahoe Basin portion of Placer County. We're doing this with every jurisdiction, and it really is just designed to better achieve TRPA's environmental objectives, facilitate redevelopment, improvement in water quality, what's best for the lake. And I just want to thank you. I think your staff does an amazing job, and we're looking forward to working together with all the different partners in the local jurisdictions to simplify, streamline, and make this code that has grown over the years at TRPA to become something that's pretty hard to navigate into something that can more effectively get redevelopment on the ground, get environmental improvement on the ground, and help our communities achieve the vision that we have for them. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Carmen, before you go, could you, just while we have you here, I know that the regional plan update deadline has morphed over the years. What are we looking at in terms of the TRPA Governing Board adopting this and moving forward with a final plan?
Right. Well, as you know, Jennifer, from having served so well on the Governing Board, it's not always possible to determine when the Governing Board will take action.
On anything.
What we're committing to as staff is to bring forward the process for adoption in the final quarter of 2012.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Dave McClure from Tahoe Vista, and I just felt it was necessary to at least bring up the fact that not everyone buys hook, line, and sinker the notion of transect zoning for the North Shore and West Shores of Lake Tahoe. If you do, which I strongly recommend, research on the internet. It takes 30 minutes. You'd find out where it came from, where this idea came from, and what it's all about. And you'll find that it's part of urban planning, the new urbanist movement. And it generally depends on concentric communities, okay, like South Lake Tahoe is an applicable area. The North and West Shores are ribbon development. So you have your main highway and the commercial located along the main highway, and then one block you go into residential neighborhoods. So it's completely different than what transect zoning is based on, which is this density-based model of multi-tiering down your densities. We're going from one block to the next block of commercial to residential. And unless that model is being proposed to be drastically changed, where we're going to have 3 or 4 blocks of transitions of multi-unit complexes and so on going down, that is a drastically different vision for the North and West Shores of Lake Tahoe than anyone is really used to or has been talked about in this area. So I think when you get into changing the zoning, it's extremely critical for certain areas that have certain physical characteristics of development and are not urban centers like Portland, Oregon, or Vancouver, where these ideas have been experimented. So I just wanted to let you know there is opposition and questions about transect zoning and its applicability on the north and west shores of Tahoe. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to address this item? Questions? Mentioned there were a couple thousand developable parcels in the basin. Is that correct? Do we know how many there are in Placer County? Roughly, or?
I couldn't give you the exact statistic. The number, the basin-wide number is 4,766, if that's interesting to you. But I don't know the exact number for Placer County offhand. Apologize.
Thanks.
I think our staff might have some.
Do you guys know?
I was just looking at Jennifer Merchant, and she seemed to think it was 1,400.
1,400? Thanks. Any other questions or comments? Okay, staff is looking for specific direction as it relates to the comments.
I move we direct staff to submit comments to the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency on the new zoning classifications.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. We'll now take up our 10:15 item, which is an update on the Eastern Placer Biomass Project.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Planning Services is providing an update on the county's proposed Eastern Placer County Biomass Project. The update includes an overview of the various elements of the biomass program and a discussion on the status of the preparation of the environmental document for the proposed project. This is an informational item, and Jerry Haas with our office is going to make the presentation.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Honorable Board. I'm here to present an update on the Eastern Placer County Biomass Project. I'd like to go back in time a bit to explain how this project came to be. It'll tie in nicely to Mr. Holmes' statement earlier about Placer County's Clean Air Award, Federal Clean Air Award for our biomass program. The Wildfire Protection and Biomass Utilization Program was initiated by the Board of Supervisors through adoption of the Placer County Biomass Strategic Plan in 2007. The goals of the biomass program, as outlined here: reduce wildfire risk, protect citizens from the consequences of catastrophic wildfires, and to improve air quality. To date, Placer County has initiated several projects to meet these goals. One project in particular has been important to the biomass program for about 2 years now, and that is the Eastern Placer County Biomass Project. As stated in the strategic plan, decades of fire suppression activity has led to an unnatural accumulation of woody biomass in county forests. Forest thinning is currently being enacted in Placer County to address this accumulation. The problem to date is that once thinned, the material is expensive to transport and is unsafe to leave in piles on site. The concept of a biomass energy facility was born of the idea that excess material being generated as a result of treating overgrown forest land could become an economical use for fuel in the generation of electricity. Why in Eastern Placer County? It's where the trees are. Here are 2 potential locations under consideration for the construction of a biomass energy facility. The proposal includes the construction of a 1 to 3 megawatt biomass energy facility to be located either in Kings Beach or at the Cabin Creek landfill site. Alternative A is the Kings Beach location. At this site, the Planning Commission would consider a conditional use permit. If it was approved by the Planning Commission, then TRPA would consider approval of a public service project application. And then if approved by TRPA, the Air Pollution Control District would also require new source permits for the facility. This is an aerial image of the Kings Beach site. It's located 1 block north of the intersection of Deer Street and Speckled Avenue. It's about 800 feet east of State Route 267. The site lies within Plan Area Statement 026, Kings Beach Industrial Community Plan. That's the area shown down here in yellow. The larger parcel is about 23 acres in size, and it's zoned conservation. These units up here are backup diesel generators that are tied to the electric grid via transformer and substation on the site. And this facility was constructed back in 1969. The parcel in red is the subject parcel down here. I'm sorry, help you all out. It's about 1.3 acres in size, and it functions primarily as an access to the larger parcel in the rear. This is a preliminary site plan of what the facility would look like out there. As you can see, the facility would occupy the northeast portion of the site, and the existing truck access would run along the west side of the building here. These are some images of the site as it exists today. A portion of it's been cleared, leveled, and gravelled. Alternative B is a location west of Kings Beach and outside the Tahoe Basin. This specific location is the county-owned landfill and materials recovery facility just north of Cabin Creek between Truckee and Tahoe City. And most of you passed it on the way in here today or yesterday. This site is zoned forest with a special purpose combining district to ensure that all new development in the area would be compatible with the existing landfill. Here's a site plan for the proposed facility at Cabin Creek. Essentially the same type of facility, but with different building design and materials. And here's some images of the Cabin Creek site. Down here, bottom right, is the materials recovery facility. Immediately left of that, down here in the bottom left corner, is the potential site for a facility to be located at Cabin Creek. Up here, top left, is material that's being mulched. There's the big mulcher there. And then this is some refrigerators. Placer County is currently preparing a joint environmental document with TRPA. The EIR will satisfy CEQA. The EIS will satisfy TRPA code requirements for the project. Due to its federal funding nexus, there's also a NEPA requirement, and this document is being prepared to also satisfy the DOE, Department of Energy, NEPA requirements for the site. There's a list of environmental issues being analyzed in the EIR, EIS. In July last year, a notice of preparation was circulated and was followed up with 2 public meetings for scoping, both of which were held in the Tahoe Basin. Concerns expressed by the neighboring residents were included the potential for increased truck traffic, noise, and local and regional air quality impacts. A particular concern from the community at that time and ever since has been the lack of an out-of-basin alternative for the project site. Although CEQA does not require an an off-site alternative for a project, Placer County and TRPA agreed that such an analysis was warranted in this case. As a result, Cabin Creek site was upgraded from materials storage site to an actual off-site alternative. Therefore, all these issues are being analyzed in depth at both of these project sites. At this time, we're awaiting completion of the administrative draft document, which is real close to being done, and it is anticipated that the public draft EIR, EIS would be available late this summer. You know how that goes, though. Your staff report indicates that additional information beyond the update might be available today. Through analysis of the environmental documentation, the EIR consultant has identified a noise impact that cannot be mitigated at the Kings Beach location. The project would exceed average noise levels at the north property line up against Martis Peak conservation zoning. And this noise and the level of noise cannot be brought down below the threshold established by the plan area statement, even when mitigation measures are considered. Because the EIR, EIS is a joint document, this noise issue was brought to the attention of TRPA. Typically, environmental issues would daylight with the public draft of the environmental document. However, on July 21st, Joanne Marquetta, Executive Director of TRPA, submitted a report to the governing board, which will be heard for their meeting tomorrow, and you all have a copy of that report. In the report, Ms. Marquetta states, as it is within my discretion under TRPA's rules of procedure, I recommended to Placer County that the Kings Beach site not be analyzed in detail in the EIS, and be identified as an alternative considered but rejected. The noise threshold can only be exceeded through a plan area statement amendment, and that's something that TRPA is not willing to consider while the regional plan is being updated. As you are all aware, this project has generated considerable public interest. Staff presentation today was intended to be an update to your board. However, in light of recent developments, we stand by ready for your direction. The environmental document is on hold pending consideration of Placer County and TRPA positions regarding the Kings Beach location. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions, comments this time by the board?
I'm going to hold my comments until I've heard from fellow board members and the public.
I have one question, Jerry. In the environmental review, early on, there was discussion about trying to fold in the notion of the impact of a catastrophic fire as an alternative and the impacts it would have on air quality. Are we going to be able, and you know, the law inherently doesn't provide for that, are we going to be able to get some specificity in that, in the documents, or on that in the documents?
Regrettably, I have not seen even the administrative draft yet. I don't know exactly how it's going to be crafted. Ultimately, we'll have the say on whether or not that's going to be a discussion that's included in that document, but without having the benefit of having it in front of me, I can't really answer that.
Great, thanks, Jerry. I'm sorry, Mr. Supervisor Holmes.
Were you done, Mr. Chairman?
I am, I think
thank
so.
you. Sorry.
I'll let you know if I change my mind, but go ahead.
Regarding the noise analysis, those diesels that are in the Kings Beach site now generate quite a bit of noise when they're running. Is there an analysis of that? And I know they were put in before the regulations, but do you know what the noise decibels are for?
My understanding is that the noise threshold pretty much is already crossed. So it's a little bit above the 50 decibels at the Martis Peak Conservation. So if we go back up to the site, Kings Beach site, the diesel generators, you're right, are very noisy. But recently, in 2007, they were housed. This is an older picture. It shows the diesel generators outdoors in the open. They're backup diesel generators. They don't operate all the time. So the noise analysis is based on an average noise level. If they were to exceed a noise level, it would only be a temporary concern up there. Now that they're housed, they really don't create a whole lot of noise, even when they are fired up. I'm not sure that residents can hear them too well up there. If they do hear them, essentially the baseline consideration is that the noise threshold has been exceeded, albeit by 1 or 2 decibels at this north property line here. That being consideration, TRPA is really unwilling to consider adding to and making it less conforming.
So the noise threshold if the proposed biomass plan will come out in the environmental document.
The environmental document will explain that the noise threshold would be exceeded by this project, even with all the mitigation we proposed with sound walls and everything else. There's just no way to get it below that noise threshold.
So the executive director of TRPA, is the EIS prepared? Where did she get that information?
That information, as I mentioned, this is a joint document. We're preparing this hand in hand with TRPA. So TRPA folks that we were working with became aware of it about the same time we did.
No more comments right now.
And if I could just follow up on that a little bit. The TRPA right now, because of Judge Carlton's ruling on the shore zone issues where he talked about thresholds specifically, are particularly sensitive, I would say, to paying attention to their thresholds. Judge Carlton's ruling essentially, as it related to thresholds, said not only can you not make them worse, which this would according to Joanne Marquetta, but that you actually have to improve them with any projects that you're bringing forward. So I think the TRPA is just living in a whole new reality of what's facing them in terms of thresholds because of that litigation.
Any other questions, comments? Are there any members from the public who'd like to address this item? Thanks, Jerry. Please come forward and state your name. Just come to the podium and state your name for the record.
My name is Edward Lieberman, and I only became aware of the issue relatively recently, and I don't feel I have enough background really to make detailed comment. But I did visit the site. I visited Deer and Speckled and went up and down the adjacent streets, and I found it. And again, I have not researched in detail. I don't claim to be rendering any definitive statements or even fully formed opinions here. But I was struck by the fact that this is a predominantly residential area, and that putting such a heavy-duty industrial facility in such an area with all the potential safety issues and environmental issues that might raise, it struck me as just on first impression very much out of place. And I've read a lot of things on the internet the last few days, but I really can't. I'm not in a position to comment on all that. But right off the bat, it doesn't pass the plausibility test. And I find it interesting now that the noise issue is being raised. The noise is very important, but my initial impression is that noise may be the least of the issues here. It's a very important issue, but it's great that everyone is focused on it. But there might be much more prominent issues, such as industrial safety issues. While this is obviously non-nuclear, I think that the recent Japan events have shown that assurances of safety that go by for years and are not seriously challenged sometimes turn out later not to have been well thought out, well explored, alternatives well considered. So I would just point out that I would hope that in addition to the noise issues, to the extent that Kings Beach remains on the table at all, I would hope that other issues of safety, of emissions, of possible fires, explosions, of employee training, of what happens in off hours when the best employees are not available and emergency stand-in employees have to be used, of computer failures. There are a myriad of issues besides noise that might exist, and I would hope that those would not be disregarded in the process. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Ellie Waller, Tahoe Vista resident. If Mr. Holmes could repeat what you talked about this morning for the people that weren't here to hear your visit with Mr. Emerson. Thank you.
This morning under Supervisor reports, I reported of my trip to Washington, D.C. on June the 7th on behalf of the Placer County Air Pollution Control District, which received a Environmental Protection Agency Clean Air Excellence Award for our work on the biomass utilization project in the Tahoe Basin. We were accompanied by the regional forester, the deputy regional forester from the Southwest Pacific region of the U.S. Forest Service, and George Emerson, the chief operating officer of Sierra Pacific Industries, for our work in collaboration of removing forest debris out of the forest and removing it and not burning it, thus reducing the effects of air pollution in the basin. We were only one of 12 jurisdictions in the nation that were received that type of an award. The benefits of going back on June the 7th, we met with high-level staff members from the Department of U.S. Forest Service and also from Bureau of Reclamation and the Bureau of Land Management, and we got high regard regarding our efforts to reduce the forest waste and thus reduce the threat of catastrophic wildfire and burning in Tahoe Basin. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I believe it still is. My name is Joel Bear. I'm a Kings Beach resident. I've been there for 8 years. I think everyone can hear me here. This is my first chance to attend a meeting. I actually have been part of the biomass protests that have been happening throughout Kings Beach and North Lake. We did 2 in Kings Beach, 1 in Incline Village, and then 1 in Tahoe City. Again, 2 months ago, no one in the North Shore knew what biomass was, and now through Facebook and Unofficial Squaw has post articles, and the majority of people who you tell about this project, once they learn about it, they can't even believe that something like this was even on the table for the North Lake. And here you have a graphic of Kings Beach, which I think is amazing because this has been going around, but this is actually my neighborhood in my town where I mountain bike. So I just want to point out that you have an elementary school, which is right about here.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Your comments need to be directed to the board, so if you want us to...
I apologize. You have to,
there you go.
if you look at the map, if you were to go another 300 yards, basically half of a football field down, that is an elementary school. You have residents, you have people there. Mountain bike trails, I use it as a recreation area constantly. And again, the reason I came out today is regarding the Air Quality Act, which is amazing. It's that our air quality is so clear in Kings Beach that this proposal would go through. However, biomass in theory, I'm not for or against it. I understand the need to find alternative energy. However, as a Kings Beach resident, if you were to stand there, we have a wellness center on the corner. You also have an elementary school, and as well as residential trails that are constantly being used by the community there. So again, it's amazing that this graphic is being shown. However, the lake is, again, 300 yards south of this. And the fact that the two possible locations are either put it next to Kings Beach or put it next to the dump, and the fact that we're having this conversation right now is just, it's unbelievable. I'm glad I could be here. I work a lot in the summertime. I work for the Hyatt, so I work later. I've worked 20 days in a row. But I love Tahoe here. Again, I've been here for 8 years. I've been in Kings Beach for 8 years. And I plan on continuing to stay there. However, this is something that directly influenced me, because every day I do go to those trails and I do mountain bike there and I do exercise there. And this is my place and this is my sacred space, and you have to stand up for those places in the world. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else from the public?
Yes, is this working? Okay. Yeah. I'm Dawn Buffone, and I am a resident of Kings Beach. I am the secretary and founder of the Lake Tahoe Anti-Biomass Plant Coalition. A couple of things I want to say, I'm sure you guys know me by now, is that Jennifer Montgomery did come to our meeting last week and assure us all that this is not going to happen in Kings Beach. And so I'm very surprised to come to this meeting and still see Kings Beach as the #1 location. Why would our supervisor come to our meeting and tell us this location is off of the plan, and still we're being presented with Kings Beach as the #1 location? I just want to note something that Jerry Haas did mention, and that was the fact that he said that, we're doing this biomass plant in the eastern Sierra region because that's where the trees are. Well, that is not true, because the biomass material you can't get to it 6 months out of the year. There's snow covering it. I don't know if you guys don't understand the fact that in Tahoe, we can't get to the ground. Last year we had snow for 6 months that was deep, okay? So it just doesn't make sense how this material can be removed out of the forest to supply this biomass plant up here. That I just wanted to address that because he said that. Another thing is, can I please see slide 7? Would you mind? Sure.
The other 7.
Okay, is there a way that we can be furnished with that? Is that something that us as residents can see up close what you guys are planning to put right next door to my home?
Yes.
Okay, because this is the first time I've seen this drawing. I've seen the aerial shot of where you want to put it, but we as residents and people that, in fact me, who lives within 100 feet of where this thing you guys want to put it, have never even really been told, like, what's going to be there, what is going to be put right next to our home. So is that, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but did you say yes, we can be furnished with that? Thank you so much. And so I just want to further say that we really are hoping that Placer County will listen to the TRPA with their recommendation that this not be put in Kings Beach, and furthermore anywhere in the basin. It's such a bad idea for the Lake Tahoe Basin. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, please come forward. And others who want to speak, please be prepared to come forward so we can.
My name is William McClure, and I'm here representing the Brockway Springs Homeowners Association. And we are on record with the county as having concerns, as others have expressed, on noise, safety, traffic. I'm not related to Dave McClure, not that I will admit anyway. And my real question here is there a timetable for the board taking formal action in removing the Kings Beach site from the study?
Well, I'll try to answer that as best as I can. We're in a process, so this has been, as I think it was mentioned, we started in 2007. So there is no specific deadline as to any part of the plan other than the goal ultimately was to attempt to evaluate and hopefully cite a facility that would function, and there are a lot of constraints and parameters by which we had to make that consideration. So it's early in the process. What the five of us are going to do is up to the five of us collectively, and again, it's a process. There aren't any specific deadlines in it.
Okay. And maybe of the staff, because I know that TRPA folks left, do you know if they're going to have a formal adoption on their agenda tomorrow, or do you know?
I'm not aware of how that'll be reported.
It's not on their agenda tomorrow as a formal action item. It's in the executive director's report. Okay. My guess is that board will find themselves in the same situation as this board, which is we had an agendized informational item here today upon which we can't actually take action. So any action that board or this board would take would be in the future. We can't act on it today because it's not agendized as such.
Okay. And recommendation was that Placer County withdraw Kings Beach as a project alternative. So it wasn't really directed to the board, her board, to take action.
I see.
And
okay.
in fact, if I could maybe help her, I think what will happen today is that the board collectively, it's an informational item, but we will make comments to staff, and I think it'll be fairly evident to staff what our individual thoughts are, and if there's consensus, that will be helpful, and if there's not, they'll know that.
Okay. And so, will that be done now or
correct.
At a few? Oh, now.
At the end of this hearing
Great.
today, correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You bet. Next speaker, please.
Good morning. My name is Dave McClure, not related to the prior speaker. He's got a lot better hair. What can I say? Today, though, my comments are on behalf of the North Tahoe Citizens Action Alliance, and would appreciate the time allotted, since we have initiated a lot of the Public Records Act requests that have given us a lot of the facts that were never discussed or brought out into the public realm and now are known. And I just wanted to comment that Supervisor Holmes, he made a very good point. There's no question that combusting a pile of slash is going to produce more emissions than controlled combustion. Nobody has ever argued that point. In fact, it was so obvious from the beginning to those of us who live here in this area of forested material and have worked in the industry that we assume that that's true. We stipulate that completely. That is totally true. A pile of burned slash. The problem is that a power plant consumes thousands of tons of biomass material. It is not burning one pile. And in fact, we got the records of all the open burning on the Placer County portion of the Lake Tahoe Basin for the last 6 years to try to understand what really are the facts about how much open burning has been going on in the Lake Tahoe Basin. And the Placer County Air Pollution Control District was very good in revealing all of the permit material as well as the actual burn data sheets on a daily basis for the last 6 years. We have since analyzed that data, and the results are astounding. If one is to look at the fires that have been conducted for the last 6 years in the entire area east of Tahoe City, So if we could go back to the map, it might help some people looking at the map. East of Tahoe City to the state line, which is a very large area, much larger than the impact of a power plant in Kings Beach. Much larger. It includes Burton Creek, several miles from the proposed facility. The total amount of material that's been burned on the average year over this 6 years is 553 green tons. 553 green tons. This translates into about 250, 260 bone-dry tons, which is the measurement used in a power plant for the fuel that a power plant needs to consume. A bone-dry ton, 0% moisture. Green ton is the measurement that's used when they reduce fuels in the forest and pile the material for burning. So how much fuel is 250 bone-dry tons? It's enough for about 5 days of plant operation. 5 days out of 365 days. So what's happened here is that the staff has taken a situation that is true, which is that when you burn an open pile, very bad emissions result. And it's better to grind up or chip that material, dry it, screen it, process it, deliver it to a power plant, and burn it that way in controlled combustion than have the open burn. No one disagrees with that. That effort should continue. But to use that scientific fact as a basis to justify a power plant that will burn 365 days a year, and the only open burning would, if you were able to pay for all of it to be collected, processed, and burned in the plant, would account for a few days of that plant operation. That's the problem. That's the fallacy here. And it's very sad that Kings Beach is still being considered on the plant. What we would like to see, and we feel this action is the kind of action that would really show Placer County is taking this issue seriously. And as one of the prior speakers had mentioned, for 6 or 8 months out of the year, all the material has to be shipped from Cabin Creek. There is no storage on the site at the Kings Beach Power Plant. It's simply a plant. So for all winter long, trucks have to haul the material from Cabin Creek into Kings Beach. Cabin Creek is the only site. That's where you start, because that's where all the material goes and is stored. This agreement right here that was dated last June in 2010, signed by Supervisor Euler, is the reimbursement agreement with TRPA. This is the agreement right here that needs to be canceled or nullified. There should really be no further activity on a power plant in the Tahoe Basin. It's totally unjustified. All the material and achieving all the good goals that you've done so far will still be able to be achieved by using Cabin Creek, continuing to use Cabin Creek as the location of collection, storage, processing of all the chip material, all the woody biomass material. That will continue. All the stuff comes out of Tahoe. In fact, we calculated the burn data down the West Shore. About 67% of the fires are down the West Shore. The West Shore is closer to Cabin Creek than it is to Kings Beach. So if that material is moved, it is quicker to Cabin Creek. So there is no justification anymore for Kings Beach, and we believe this document, this reimbursement agreement, should be canceled as a sign to the people in the Tahoe Basin that there won't be a power plant pursued there. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Hello, Roger Patching.
Morning.
It's going to fall. Friends of Lake Tahoe. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'll not take as much time as I did last time, but I wanted to thank the chairman for his extension of additional time. I think you've already heard that this is an issue that has caused a lot of concern, if not anger, And I would like to have you think of my comments as coming from the loyal opposition. I do oppose the plant, obviously, but I don't oppose you. I think most of you know my background, my career for all my adult life. I've been a political science professor and a consultant. I've worked with agencies such as yours and campaigns. I know you're dedicated and I know you're well-intended. I think what happened here is that you ended up presiding over a flawed process. It wasn't your fault. You had no hand in it, but it resulted in false conclusions, which led to false claims and false expectations. And that, I think, was tied to bad science, or maybe a combination of the two. And by that, I don't mean to denigrate Jerry at all. This is a marvelous man. I think he's one of the best assets you have in the entire county, and I've worked with him, and he understands this and has a terrific personality as well. And of course, it's been trumped by TRPA, and one might think that that would give me a great cause to celebrate and so on, and it does minutely. But my concern that I brought to you the last time we met at North Star had to do with credibility and trust, because perhaps because of my professional career, it bothers me when people have distrust and suspicion or disrespect for government agencies, and that includes you. And I think this particular issue has done damage, and I would like to ameliorate that, and I think so would you. And I think there's a way to do that. Again, nobody had a hand in creating false claims, but the bad science led to a public relations campaign that pushed us to the point where the community could no longer buy it. Bad science, unintended bad science. Sometimes political science professors try to encourage students to not do that by putting an abbreviation of the term on the sides of the blue books when they encounter it, when it's not substantiated. What I would like to have happen, I know you're going to meet, and I appreciate the chairman's comments to previous speakers about that. It would be my hope that we could recoup some of the respect, the admiration of this particular board, because nobody had a hand in doing anything wrong, by having the board allay some of the fears of the community at North Shore and elsewhere in California. I'm almost done, because we have a lot of non-resident property owners, and that's much of whom we represent. We're a coalition of both, and they're very, very worried about this, and they're worried about you coming back and doing this again. Now, that worry may be invalid, but they are worried about it. One way to sever that worry and that concern would be, and salvage the credibility, would be to have this board basically assure the community through a pledge, through a resolution of some kind, that a plant in the basin will never again be entertained. And I would recommend further than that I work with our representative, Jennifer Montgomery, to craft the language, that pledge and that resolution, to bring closure to this, subject to your approval, obviously, because otherwise it remains hanging. And you heard from Dawn, you heard from other people. There's frustration, there's suspicion, and there's anger. And I don't like any of those things, and I know that you don't either. And part of my task from the beginning, and I wrote you about this, was to address this issue of credibility and trust, because once lost, nobody has a recipe for how to recoup it in a marriage, in a business, or with a government agency. But this would perhaps be one way, and I would hope that you would consider it in your deliberations: a resolution, a pledge to bring closure to the worry that Placer County might come back 2 years from now with a different plan, a different program, a different way to do this, and we have to do this all over again. And I don't think any of us want to do that. And so please consider that. And I thank you one more time for your extension of time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Morning.
My name is Dan Daniels, and I had an opportunity to speak with an individual who operated a plant. We spoke for 6 hours. And he was saying that no matter what you do, you won't be able to mitigate the sound. Will be like a jet engine. And he said that you can put your soundproof walls in, you can put it in the ceiling, you can do whatever you want. It won't mitigate the sound. And he also said that they used about 10,000 gallons of water a day. Part of that water is used to flush out the fly ash. The fly ash usually goes into bags, it's vacuumed. There's an electromagnetic system that'll pull that ash in as well. But a lot of that ash is going to go up through the smokestack, and a lot of that ash is going to end up on the grounds. They'll flush it out of the building into gutters. That ash will go from the gutters into the pipes, and then it'll go down to TTSA. TTSA has to process this stuff. And he had mentioned that there were at least 19 different carcinogens that are in that ash. And I don't think that TTSA wants to deal with 1,000 gallons of water going down their way and then going into Reno. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers?
My name's Joan Maxwell, and I'm a resident of Auburn, California, and I have a vacation home in Kings Beach, within a half a mile of where the proposed plant is. The vacation home is something my husband and I waited years to obtain, and it's also a vacation rental. It's a condo. There's over 200 condos in Kingswood Village, which is where it is. And a lot of the residents and owners there are very upset over a proposed plant in Kings Beach. It affects our real estate value. It affects the rentals. I mean, would you want to rent a place just a half a mile or less from a power plant like this? I wouldn't. So we are very concerned, and that's on a personal level, but more community-wise, to put a plant like this next to a grammar school, next to other residents, like the lady spoke before. Her house backs up to this. You know, children play there. Can you imagine that? I mean, honestly, ask yourself this. If someone proposed to do this in your backyard, would you want it? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Hello, my name is John Staub from Kings Beach, and couple things. As far as this map here, where you're going to put the biomass plant is right in the corner, right next to the forest. And you're putting a fire right next to the forest. With Cabin Creek, they propose to put it right in the center. So as far as the potential for an accident and fire is much less at Cabin Creek. Also, as far as earlier with some of your other issues that you were talking about, you're very concerned about what the money is being spent on for different programs and all this stuff. So trucking all the fuel from Cabin Creek to Kings Beach, though it might be small amount, is just a continuous amount of money to spend, whether it's right, you know, as opposed to doing it right there at Cabin Creek. You're not gonna have to clear any of the trees at Cabin Creek. You're not gonna have to do as much, doesn't seem like you're gonna have to do as much to build the facility at Cabin Creek to spend it on there as you would in, you know, Kings Beach. So consider those. Also, from the chart you had earlier as far as the concerns about in Kings Beach, there's not a visual problem at Cabin Creek. Nobody will complain about what the visual is. Nobody will complain about the noise. And so there's a few of those issues that you should consider at Cabin Creek because it is so far away. So I just wanted to say those. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers who'd like to address the board? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the board for comments, noting that, again, this is an informational item, but certainly we're capable and free to make any comments we wish.
Thank you. I will start. I would like to just, a lot of issues that were raised here today, and a lot of them are issues that we've discussed ourselves internally. I think I'd like to start, if I could, with Mr. Patching's comments about credibility and trust. And I agree with him. I think credibility and trust are absolutely critical in the relationship between the county and the communities that we all represent. And I think, frankly, the fact that we, when we were informed of this issue, immediately came forward and daylighted it, shows that credibility exists. Part of doing the environmental process is identifying problems exactly like the ones that were identified in this, acknowledging those problems, and if they preclude a project from moving forward, saying they preclude the project from moving forward. From my perspective, that's exactly what's happening here. If I could just very briefly digress and read the July 20 memorandum from Joanne Marquetta. She wrote in her executive director's report, on July 18, 2011, I informed the county of the TRPA staff's determination that the site is unworkable and recommended to them meaning the county, that the Kings Beach project site be removed from consideration as an alternative included in the detailed EIR/EIS for the county's proposed project. Joanne writes farther in this, factors that entered into my recommendation include 1, wide-ranging community opposition to this particular location, 2, information learned in consultation with the EIS contractor assent about potential noise impacts which could not be mitigated, 3, the long-term daily increases in truck traffic necessary to support the ongoing operation of the facility and the long-term effects of such traffic on the adjacent neighborhood residents and the surrounding residential community, and 4, the consequent potential incompatibility with use of the surroundings. So my question to Jerry or Paul is, it's pretty clear from this document from Ms. Marquetta that the TRPA is certainly not willing to move forward in terms of the EIS, which is their piece of this. So what are the implications to the county in light of her comments?
If we were to proceed on the current path, the environmental document could be prepared, could be completed in as little as a few months. It is very likely the document would identify one or more environmental issues that cannot be mitigated. We would have a resultant document that could indicate that there are significant and unavoidable impacts with the Kings Beach site that would not be present at the Cabin Creek facility. That's probably what would happen if we just stayed the course. If we were redirected to take a look at another project or to take a look at Cabin Creek as a facility and Kings Beach as an alternative, and Tony, maybe you can help me out on this one, I don't believe we can identify at the onset Kings Beach being an alternative site if we know prior to scoping that it's going to be infeasible. That would mean a new environmental document with Kings Beach, or excuse me, with Cabin Creek as a project, and then possibly alternative technologies or alternative locations or alternative size and scope at Cabin Creek facility. That would mean completely abandoning this document that we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on, redirecting it into a new document that would take a few months to get up and running, but most of the analysis is already there.
I guess the question that I was really trying to get at, and I was not very clear in asking this question, is if the TRPA is unwilling to move forward with the EIS and is unwilling to certify a document, can a project even go forward in the Tahoe Basin without their approval?
The EIS portion would not, I'm sorry.
Well, joint jurisdictions within Tahoe Basin, both TRPA has to approve a project as well as Placer County, so that's why we're moving forward with two joint document, EIR, EIS. TRPA would not be able to approve the proposed project if we were to move forward.
So it would not be able to move forward without TRPA's approval?
That's correct. You need both jurisdictions' approval in the basin.
Okay. I just really wanted to make that clear because I think it's it's pretty clear in Joanne's comments that she, with her role as executive director, does have the authority to tell her staff not to move forward in terms of this, with or without the governing board's support. And I think it's really important that we understand what that means as a county. That means the Kings Beach site, whether we love it or not, which is a totally different issue, is off the table if the TRPA is not on board with it. I think it's pretty clear the TRPA is not on board with it. So that then brings the question really back to us. What do we do moving forward in the future? And this gets to the question I think that Dawn raised earlier that I would like to respond to, which is, why are we even still talking about this today if it's off the table? Basically because we're not a very nimble organization as a county. We're like a big boat that moves a certain direction, and getting that boat to change is a little more difficult than just saying, oh, left turn. So what I wanted to do today, because we're being asked for direction from the staff, is to give some direction to the staff that will bring this back to the board as soon as possible. I would hope we could get this back in front of our board at our first meeting in August to discuss exactly what our next steps are in terms of taking this off the table. We cannot do it today because this is not an action item. It's not agendized as an action item. But what we can do is give some very specific direction. I'm going to give my suggestions. I'm sure my fellow board members have some direction of their own, or they may just love so much what I have to say that they just have nothing to say. I think what we need to do, first of all, is circle back with Joanne at the TRPA. They are having a meeting tomorrow where this will be discussed with the governing board. And I think after that meeting and after hearing what the governing board has to say to Joanne, I think we should circle back to the TRPA and get really a confirmation from them that this is off the table. I think it's pretty clear in the memorandum from Joanne Marquetta, but I think we need to confirm that. I think that we should also, in conjunction with our consultants and staff, review any options or recommendations for our future consideration on how to proceed with the biomass project without a Kings Beach alternative in light of the TRPA positions. I would ask that staff return as soon, I speak English, return as soon as practical with those recommendations for formal Board of Supervisors actions. And I would agree with Mr. McClure, who probably will want to change his position since we're in agreement now. But I suggest we look at canceling our agreement with the TRPA on the joint EIR-EIS and proceed with a real solid look at Cabin Creek and see if a project is even really potentially possible there. We don't know. And again, that's part of going through the process. Cabin Creek may turn out to be a location that's not appropriate either for any number of reasons. But I think that would be the direction I would give. But I would also recommend that the staff should prepare time and cost estimates for altering the plan so that we can figure out, do we need to rescope it? Do we need to do a new NOP? What do we need to do? What would that process be? How much would it cost the county? Understanding that these county costs are borne by all of us taxpayers. So those would be my recommendations.
Jim.
Does staff, you said the first meeting in August?
I would like to do it as soon as possible. If the first meeting in August is not achievable, I would like to do this in August, so potentially a second meeting if the first meeting just can't be done. I want us to strive for the first meeting, which would be August 9th, I believe.
Yeah. And how would that affect staff? Could staff do that reasonably, or should we put that in the second? I'd rather see it in the second meeting of August.
We'll do as best we can to get it on the first meeting in August. Obviously, we have to work with the clerk of the board and get the staff report ready and for presentation, but we'll make every effort we can to get it on August, on that first August meeting.
My 2 cents in here. Being new to the board, I'm not. I don't have the full history of this trust, no trust kind of situation. I'm not in disagreement with the supervisor with regards to that proposal. The one thing that I do want to make abundantly clear is that the decision rests with the county to decide whether to move forward, whether not to move forward. And because it's a joint jurisdiction, TRPA does have some jurisdiction. And I think at the end of the day, you know, that a certain amount of weight needs to be given to that decision and to that correspondence. That's really the biggest concern that I have, is that, you know, we're in a process of trying to vet these things, and in the process, certain issues are going to come up that are going to bolster one position and that are going to not bolster another position. So I think that's where maybe some of the frustration might be coming from, as far as where we are in that particular process. The second thing that I think that troubles me is, and I'm just going to use myself as an example, you know, when I go out and speak to my constituents, I'm speaking from my perspective, and I don't represent the other board members, so I just want to, you know, maybe that's where some of the angst might have come from, but I don't disagree that there is a lot of information here that needs to be vetted and understood. And just to give you some perspective to where I am, you know, representing District 1, I have a similar situation with a amenity, a county amenity that's in the middle of the district that we're experiencing some challenges with regards to noise. So I'm very familiar with the issues that are here, you know, and I'm very sensitive to that. So I do appreciate the comments of Supervisor Montgomery, and trying to forge a path to get us to that juncture where we can make an ultimate decision. So.
My comments are really aimed at the folks who showed up here today thinking that somehow a decision had been made, or that we were moving down this path of a facility in Kings Beach. We are a deliberative board that has processes put in place by state and federal law that we have to follow when it comes to doing projects and analyzing data. The letter to which Mr. McClure referred, that I signed as chairman of this board, was nothing more than the action that this board took last year to get together with TRPA and say, let's study this and see what we find out. And here we are. We studied it, and we're finding out maybe it's in a good location. But that's part of the process. That's why we go through this. That's why we have these meetings, so that we can have these conversations. So, you know, I understand people's concerns about, I don't want this in my backyard. I get that. But it's through engaging this process that we find out what the problems are, what the noise levels are, what the air quality. So let's engage this process together. Let's not stand here and wave papers and point fingers. Let's have a conversation. Let's hear what folks are saying. And through the deliberative nature of this board, more times than not, we get it right. Yeah, we screw up once in a while, but more times than not, we get it right. And I think what the community is going to see is that this board does hear you. We do listen. We don't show up having our minds all made up on all these things. And we appreciate your input. And I support Supervisor Montgomery's request that we move forward with actually being able to take action on this, so as to put some people's minds to rest once and for all.
Okay, and I'll just add on somewhat. I guess the overwhelming. Well, first of all, I want to start. I will take exception to what I interpreted as this notion that staff behaved irrationally in considering the Kings Beach site. So if staff could just highlight some of the attributes that are necessary for a successful site, I think that would be important, because we only have 2. There possibly could have been 20 or 50, but so if you could delineate some of the critical components that are necessary for a site to be a feasible site.
The site to be a feasible site, as I mentioned earlier, would be best suited for eastern Placer County. You want to be as close as you can to the sourcing of the material. Beyond that, a little bit of land to be able to store the material, access to it, and to be in a zone district that allows for it. Within the basin, there aren't too many of those locations. The reason the Kings Beach site, is my understanding, was selected was because there's already power generating use there. We had a willing partner who'd be willing to help us contribute to the cost of construction. The infrastructure was in place. That's why that site was looked at. Cabin Creek certainly has all the attributes that would make it a good potential fit for a facility like this, but the analysis is not complete yet, so we still have to take a look at a few other issues out there.
So with that, just that people might not be aware, county essentially took this up because we wanted to consider the prospect of dramatically improving what our current conditions, which are that there's a huge amount of fuel in the basin as per the Angora fire experience, ready to create tremendous amount of air pollution, not to mention the other devastation that occurs from a wildfire. Basin is perfectly positioned for that. So there may be a certain record of historical burns that have occurred, but my understanding that whatever has historically been burned, we dramatically want to increase that however it's done. Otherwise, we're not going to get ahead of the fuels that are being created on a daily basis as a tree grows. So the key thing I want to communicate to the community is the best bet is for you to continue to be engaged and develop a relationship with actually all of us. I will have to go through a little bit of therapy and mention that on 3 different occasions, the voters of this county have decided that we should be paid a very part-time salary, and we are an extreme anomaly for any county of our size and budget and consideration. So short of the fact that we're short of time in doing this job, we're accessible. That's the attribute of local government. And we try as best as we can within that constraint to be as available as possible, and we understand that up here, we are your government. There are no incorporated cities up in the basin or even in this part of the county. So it's us. The county doesn't have to do this at all, but if we can find a desirable site that is cost-effective and actually will pencil, we consider it to be a tremendous alternative. As Supervisor Holmes mentioned, the notion is incredibly popular in Washington, which is why we've received millions of dollars so far to help us get through this process. And we think that a successful outcome could be hugely an improvement for the local residents as compared to what currently exists. So having been on the board now in my 17th year, I just want to close by saying that I'm extraordinarily proud of, in fact, the commitment that Placer County has always made to that notion and being successful and going through this process properly. So I would encourage you again to all get engaged. There are times like when Mr. McClure disagrees with the outcome that the board takes as per the downtown improvements project in Kings Beach. But I think for those of you in Kings Beach, you can look at that and see the commitment that we made. I think we had 3 public hearings at the board level in considering the alternative that we actually adopted. So that's really where we are. Again, to note, the meetings that we might consider Jennifer's considerations would be August 9th or the 23rd. They're scheduled to be in Auburn. We get up here 3 or 4 times a year. We could potentially have a special meeting that fits the board's schedules and get up here. That costs time and money, but we've done it in the past. So with that, anybody else have any further or closing comments?
I just want to close by thanking everyone for coming out today, thanking them for being engaged in this process, and just really reiterate something that Kirk said, which is we are a deliberative body, which means we don't just look at data. We also make policy decisions. That's part of our role as a board. And, I think that the decisions we make in terms of policy, someone said to me, well, it's a neighborhood versus the dump. That's ultimately a policy decision if it were even to get to that point with this board. And I would just like to say that I think it's important that you realize that we do listen to you. We do hear what you have to say. We do think about policy, not just science. And as I said a week ago, good science doesn't necessarily make good policy. But it's important that you all stay involved, that you stay committed to this process and making your voices heard to us. I would ask, again, to echo Supervisor Euler's comments, that, it just be done in a civil and constructive fashion. There were, a number of communications that I had individually with people, and I know members of this board had, that were neither civil nor constructive. But we move past that. It's part of what we do. So thank you all for coming out. I hope that we can get this on the first agenda in August. I hope you can make that. If we can call a meeting up here, a special meeting of some kind, that would be terrific. And we'll get that on the county website and let everybody know as best we possibly can. So thank you all.
So with that, I want to just, in that it was an informational item, Chair's direction to staff is to contemplate all of the comments that you heard, and I think the consensus is that you get back to us as quickly as possible and consider perhaps even a special meeting that might bring us back up here for this issue so that we can address the question as to the locations as quickly as possible before we undertake the investment in the environmental work. Okay?
Absolutely.
Is that good enough for everybody?
We'll get working on the information and get that back.
All right. And with that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.